We'll start. I'm Melissa Everett with Sustainable Hudson Valley. Chris O. Babcock, our outreach coordinator, is also on. And this is one of our over 55 events, I can't believe it, for Hudson Valley Climate Solutions Week. Blatant ripoff of the New York City week, but for the country and for the virtual audience. And we've had people from way beyond the Hudson Valley joining. We really want this to be a springboard for concerted action and ongoing maintaining of a high profile for the climate crisis and the accelerating action that ordinary people, institutions, local governments, and networks are taking. And we emphasize those groups, business and public, because they are big enough to make a difference and yet small enough to understand and connect with. And everything we do at Sustainable Hudson Valley, we do our very best to center environmental justice. Our mission is about accelerating and leveraging climate action through coordination. We worked with over 90 stakeholders in last year and the year before to frame a regional climate action roadmap and toolkit. It's kind of a path forward, a common vision, and a resource collection. And out of that, came the understanding that with the federal and state commitments to environmental justice being so put the money where the mouth is in terms of funding and accountability, there's really an opportunity. And so we have Morgan Fritz from We Act, the West Harlem Action for Environmental Justice, Samir Ranade from NYSERDA, and our moderator, Ronald Soria from Outdoor Promise. Just met Morgan, but the others are like longtime co-conspirators, and I'm always delighted. Ronald is going to take it away in a moment. He's CEO of Outdoor Promise, a nonprofit organization creating a more inclusive and sustainable outdoor experience, helping service learning, community engagement, outdoor exploration. I came upon a video of him leading a hike up Snake Hill in the city of Newburgh. He's a small business advisor. He was co-creator of the education tool Carbon Almanac, which you should definitely check out. Morgan Fritz is Director of Development at We Act, the West Harlem Action for Environmental Justice, where he works to grow a diverse funding base for initiatives to build healthy, sustainable communities. He's been a development writer for legal services, healthcare organizations, and more. He's got a doctorate in English literature and has taught at the University of Maryland, the University of Southern Mississippi. Samir Ranade is Climate Justice Advisor for the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, where he has worked throughout the agency to make sure that climate justice is infused in their work. He holds an MPA in Environmental Policy and Management from the University of Washington. His background includes experience as staff for state and federal lawmakers, presidential, gubernatorial, and senatorial elections, many stints with clean energy and environmental organizations. His expertise is at the intersection of ethics, social science, climate policy, and public administration. And when he is not working all the time, he enjoys writing rhymes about environmental justice, drinking coffee, and jogging in New York City's parks. So extra credit, drop some of those rhymes into the chat. Basically, I'm thrilled that we have an agenda with a small enough number of presenters that it's not going to be a fire hose. And these are thoughtfully prepared presentations about federal and state funding to help you get oriented and provide a platform for your many questions. And with that, let me hand it over to Ronald.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm excited about all these opportunities, and I just wanted to share some of my background and how all this stuff is relevant. And honestly, I'm excited about the opportunity, but also fearful that some of these opportunities might just fly by because we aren't prepared for them. But I'll go into that now. I'm the co-founder of Outdoor Promise, and like Melissa said, we started originally with a focus on increasing equitable access to outdoor recreation. My family's from the Dominican Republic, and they were deeply connected to the land, but as the newer generations growing up in the US became more and more disconnected. So I saw a lot of my cousins growing up in apartments and not being really connected to nature. And I had the privilege of having a good experience in nature. Got a scholarship to go to an away camp when I was 13 years old, and that really changed my involvement in environmental causes and getting involved. So originally, Outdoor Promise was just that increased equitable access to nature. 8 years ago, I moved to the city of Newburgh, and honestly, I kind of felt like I kind of regretted it at first because there were so many environmental injustices that our community has faced over time. When I first moved here, we're planning to start our family, and I found out that the National Guard base had polluted our drinking water. Later, I found out we had lead pipes in our house, and it goes on and on. And I took a deep dive in environmental justice, got involved with the local community. I also serve on the City of Newburgh's Conservation Advisory Council. So aside from just getting people outdoors, we're trying to get them activated to fight against the bad stuff that our community is facing, but also to fight for the good stuff, investment in our communities and changing these dynamics. We're grateful to join the Justice 40 Accelerator Program as an organization, and they've helped us build capacity, get state funding to do more hikes, and get private foundations to fund some of our programs. So it's been exciting. I also, our organization is partners with the Greater Newburgh Parks Conservancy, who manages the City of Newburgh's Environmental Justice Fellowship Program. Originally, we got funding through the Arbor Day Foundation to launch this program as a pilot project, and the City of Newburgh actually added it to its budget. So for the last 3 years, we've been doing some deep community engagement, learning what people, what they think about the environmental justice issues, who wants trees in their blocks. And in the City of Newburgh, fun fact, we have more empty street tree pits than we have street trees. So that is a problem, and that definitely has to change. So we are excited about the potential of investment in all these spaces. Melissa and Sustainable Hudson Valley are also working with the Greater Newburgh Parks Conservancy on an initiative called Planting Power in Newburgh, and maybe she could talk about that at the end. But I want to make sure that this topic is environmental justice, and it's not just a buzzword. It's not just a word that sounds good on a grant. I think this is the EPA's definition of environmental justice, and it's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, and income. So it's really about getting people involved who typically are not part of making decisions, and have borne the brunt of decisions from the past, like the City of Newburgh. So communities of color and low-income communities bear the burden of this inequality, of decisions that they didn't make that affect their day-to-day lives and their families' health. And this is why I'm so excited about the shift with all these initiatives and funding coming down, and you'll learn more about them from Morgan and at federal programs and Samir, local state level programs, that could maybe help shift these burdens, now that there's an intention to involve the community, and there's legislation and funding behind it. So it's like it's a fact that low-income people and people of color, it really makes a difference where you live. Pollution, we face the burden of pollution more than other people. Like, even adjusted for income, Black Americans even high earning Black Americans still live in these sacrifice zones, and have this burden of just like unhealthier places to live. So this is the problem, and everyone knows the problem, and it has to change. Here in Newburgh, I mentioned the water contamination, lead pipes, but it's just hotter here because we have less trees. They're in the appeal process. They were trying to put a power plant 5 miles north of here when City of Newburgh residents already have disproportionately high rates of asthmas and visits to the emergency room. They're decommissioning a nuclear power plant and wanted to put radioactive water into the river that flows on our coast here. We have lack of access to green spaces, and limited green transportation options. Like I tried riding, there's no bike lanes in Newburgh. I've tried riding my bike with my daughter, and it's pretty dangerous. So like there's a big reliance on cars, etc. And then the people, naturally, they have lack of trust in government and enforcement of the rules to protect our communities. And that's an issue that we're facing. And this is why it's so important that all these opportunities rely on deep community engagement to get people activated to fight for these things. And we act as like the gold standard for community engagement. I'm a member of We Act. Full disclosure, I participate in their climate justice working group, and I'm just learning from them how they really listen to their community, and I think that every organization should do the same, so that the community makes decisions of what happens in the place they live. So addressing all these challenges is going to require a combination of local initiatives, collaboration, state support, federal funding, deeper community engagement, and innovative solutions. And I'm excited about the opportunities that these billions of dollars with these new initiatives allow, but also fear that it might fly us by because the city of Newburgh, we have a grant administrator, and the city has really invested in improving the environment. Our Conservation Advisory Council budget has gone from 5,000 to 100,000 in the last 5 years, but we still face limited capacity to go after all these opportunities. And we look forward to working with We Act and learning from Samir about how we can take advantage of these opportunities to really make our cities thrive, and really focusing on that justice and equity piece. So I'm going to pass it on to Morgan first, who will talk about some federal programs and opportunities that are available to all of us to improve our communities. And I ask that everyone hold their questions till the end. I'm sure there will be a lot of them. These are all exciting opportunities. So Morgan, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hopefully everyone can see these slides now. Just chat me if there's any issue.
That's good.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so and yeah, thanks, Ronald. I think that set the stage really well for both of these presentations, especially with all the contextual information. The definition of environmental justice that you presented is exactly what we're using for the TICTAC, and I think especially highlighting the sense of like opportunity with all of this money that's been directed outward by the federal government, especially through Justice 40 and the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So just a quick overview of my presentation. I'll go over We Act's background really quickly. I think it's relevant to some extent to the TICTAC, and then describe the TICTAC, which is the The EPA's Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. I'll get into that in just a moment. How you can kind of connect to this resource, which is designed to help connect communities and organizations doing environmental justice work to resources, especially EPA and DOE funds, but really anything that would help you address environmental justice issues and build capacity to address those issues. And I'll go over a few specifically EPA funding opportunities, and I'll talk a little bit about why right now we're focusing on the EPA opportunities when I get to that point. So We Act is a 501c3 nonprofit founded in 1988 to address environmental racism in West Harlem. The mission of We Act is to build healthy communities by ensuring that people of color and or low-income residents participate meaningfully in the creation of sound and fair environmental health and protection policies and practices. I think it's worth noting that We Act began as a volunteer-led organization, like a lot of the organizations that we're hoping are the audience for the TICTAC. And it began, directly out of a response to the siting and poor management of the North River sewage treatment plant. So that, We Act pushed back against the threat that was posing to quality of life, in particular air quality in Harlem, and ultimately won a lawsuit that both led to the remediation of the plant. But interestingly, it also created about $1 million in funds that the organization used to start as an actual 501c3. And then since then, we've grown into an organization with 45 staff and a second office in Washington, D.C. And just to be honest, I mean, most of the growth of We Act, which now has 45 staff, feels very well resourced overall, began in 2020 when the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests, started to prompt at least some shifts in the direction of philanthropy. So I think, it's just worth noting that it's been a really long road for environmental justice over the past 30 years, which with huge, I think, tailwinds and opportunities now. And it's really critical to take advantage of some of those. So We Act is structured with 4 teams. We have organizing and membership, New York City and state policy, federal policy, and environmental health. And I think that one thing that's successful about the model of We Act is that We Act carries out community-based research, based on priorities and issues that community residents have identified. And then our organizing and policy teams can use the outcomes of this research to provide data to support advocacy campaigns that they want to carry out. And so one example, recently we had a pilot study where we removed gas stoves and replaced them with induction stoves in a number of NYCHA development homes in the Bronx. And using the data that showed how much the indoor air quality resulted from removing fossil fuel stoves and appliances from those homes, really demonstrated a strong case for building electrification. And it also pushed NYCHA to announce their own pilot to replace 10,000 gas stoves in homes with induction stoves. So a really powerful outcome from that type of study. And that type of research is something that's very much, on the table for people who want to pursue some of the EPA opportunities I'm going to mention later. And then, so here we'll get into the TICTAC. So We Act received a grant from the EPA to host a Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. Ours is serving New York and New Jersey, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But the purpose is primarily to help people gain access to federal funds, which we know can have hurdles just because of the requirements, the challenges in identifying the grants, developing projects, and writing the strong grant proposals, and then managing the grants. So the purpose of the TICTAC is really to help around all of those issues. And I think we just encourage people to reach out as soon as possible if they're interested, if they think they're interested in pursuing some of these grants, to get connected to the TICTAC, and start to identify which types of technical assistance they might need. So the grant is for 5 years. We're hopeful that there's a possibility for renewing, but we know that also there's just a huge amount of funds flowing now, and it's really all about this window of opportunity. And so we're serving New York and New Jersey, region 2, which is the region that we're situated in, also includes Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. But ultimately the EPA decided it made the most sense to have a Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands TICTAC and one serving New York and New Jersey. We developed a relationship just in the application process with Inter-American University of Puerto Rico, and are going to really try to continue that relationship, because one of the goals of our TICTAC is not just to help people access funds, which is obviously the primary goal, but also to really try to build up environmental justice networks and environmental justice power in New York and New Jersey, in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay, so then our TICTAC partnerships, we've got a couple of really strong, experienced environmental justice partners, the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance and South Ward Environmental Alliance, both in New Jersey. The other partner I just want to highlight now is Environmental Protection Network, because they are already providing or pushing out a lot of information, not just about grant opportunities that people can apply to, but also how to apply to them. So I really want to plug them as part of this presentation as a resource that can be accessed now, in terms of signing up for their newsletter on the Environmental Protection Network website. So the TICTAC, the services are primarily grant writing and fundraising. So if you need any help with grant writing, both for technical assistance for grant writing, both for EPA opportunities, but for any opportunity that you're interested in pursuing for an environmental justice project, we're here to help with that and to support you. Also, we're building up the capacity to support on grants management, and then all the things that go into understanding the environmental justice landscape, and how to develop a climate justice or an energy justice or environmental justice project. So if you have initial ideas about pursuing an environmental justice project, we're interested in helping you sort of develop those ideas, and in particular putting you into contact with experts who have experience in the field and that can help you design a successful project. And then, in terms of next steps, so we have a launch event planned for October 30th, and we'll make sure to circulate the invite to everyone who's present today, but also we're available now. So we have a website, weact.org/TICTAC, and I think we'll distribute these slides after the call, so everyone will have access to these links. And we also have an ejtictac@weact.org email address. And if you reach out to us about whatever your technical assistance needs are, we'll get back to you as soon as possible and start to make connections to the technical assistance that might be the most helpful to you. So we're launching on October 30th, but we're in the early stages now of actually being able to provide technical assistance. Okay, so I'm highlighting 3 EPA opportunities that are forthcoming or current here. And part of the reason for that is that these are major opportunities that I think really need to be highlighted. I think also Samir in a moment is going to speak to some of the NYSERDA opportunities that are out there. But I want to highlight these, but also say that we're in no way limited to providing technical assistance on EPA grants, and are definitely here to help on private foundation grants, or city, state, level grants, whatever grants you're interested in. And as we get up and running more formally, we'll start to provide more comprehensive information in our newsletter and on our website about the opportunities that are available. So I did want to highlight this one, the EPA's $19 million Drinking Water System Infrastructure Resilience and Sustainability Grant Program, in part because one of the goals of the TICTAC is to really highlight and serve rural and remote communities. So this, as far as the mission of the TICTAC, this grant is a great opportunity to help with water system projects in rural and remote communities. So if you have any interest in this, please reach out to us. I also wanted to highlight the EPA EJ Community Change Grants. So I know there's a lot of text here, and obviously I'm not going to read all the text, but we'll share this out after the presentation. But this is $2 billion in environmental justice awards in really large grants. Most of the grants are $10 million to $20 million. And one thing that's encouraging here is that based on the amount of money, there's at least 100 of these very large grants available. And obviously that's, the amount of resources available would really allow you to move forward a major project. So the status of this is that the NOFO, which will be the first step in applying to the grant, will come out in October. And we're available to help walk you through that process. But you can see that the eligibility requirements are encouraging. The main thing is that, if you're a CBO, you need to have at least one partner. And then the types of eligible activities are really, encouraging as well. Climate resiliency and adaptation, urban heat islands, low and zero emissions and resilient technologies and infrastructure. So, a huge range of potential environmental justice, energy justice, and climate justice projects. So I would really have these on your radar. Obviously, the only hurdle is, I think, if you're someone who hasn't had a lot of experience taking on federal grants, a $10 million grant might not be where you want to start, obviously. And so I also wanted to highlight that there is going to be a huge amount of smaller grants coming from the EPA in 2024. So they've released an RFP that's now closed for regional thriving communities, EJ grant makers. And so what that means is that in each region throughout the country, the EPA is going to select a re-grantor who will then launch RFPs to give out over the course of 3 years, $40 million. So that's a huge amount of resources. And then similar to the Changemaker grants, there's a huge range of, everything from environmental justice education for youth to worker training, air quality monitoring, et cetera. So I think these should definitely be on the radar, especially if if you're new to federal grants. I think this is a really, strong entry point for getting set up, applying successfully to an EPA grant, and then having a grant at a manageable size. So that is all of my presentation. So I'll stop sharing now and hand it over to Samir.
Great. Thanks, Morgan. Let me go to the share here. Can everybody see the screen?
Looks good.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Ronald, thanks for providing that really important context. So as you can imagine, there's a wide spectrum of programs that's available from the state. One thing I did just from NYSERDA, I dropped a link to the range of programs that we have. I thought I would spend my time providing context more about how our state has to focus on environmental justice. And I want to talk about some big pots of funding that are not yet available, but that will be coming. And then, one of the things that I think is just really vital that I will spend a little bit of time on as far as programs is the education side, education and job training, because, I think that's really fundamental to the clean energy economy that we're trying to build. So here I want to give an overview of the disadvantaged communities criteria that was finalized by the Climate Justice Working Group last March. As Cheryl, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or Climate Act, it required prioritizing these communities for the main purpose of targeting the reduction of greenhouse gases and other associated air pollutants, and the steering of the benefits and investments of clean energy spending and related workforce and economic development. The goal is to address the structural disadvantage created by historical and ongoing discrimination by society and governments that create burdens which are worsened by climate change and pollution. So these communities are identified across the state and defined at the census tract level. The criteria for them includes 45 indicators that fall into two components. One is environmental exposures, burdens, and climate change risks. The other is socio-demographic characteristics and health outcomes. So currently, 35% of New York's census tracts are identified as disadvantaged communities. An additional 19 census tracts that are federally designated reservation territory or state-recognized tribal nation-owned land also count, as well as individual households that report an annual income at or below 60% of the state median income. And it doesn't matter where these households are located. They can be in a geographic disadvantaged community or not. So they would count for the purposes of accounting for the clean energy and energy efficiency investments. So if you want to view a specific census tract maps, go to climate.ny.gov and go to the resources section of the website. I'll put that in the link or in the chat, and then go to the disadvantaged communities criteria section. Here you can see a map of Hudson Valley and those places that are highlighted, those census tracts that are highlighted are the ones that are designated as disadvantaged. So now I want to turn to describing a major initiative that relates to achieving our goals of reducing carbon emissions and doing so through a lens of justice. This is the economy-wide cap and invest program that NYSERDA and DEC are developing to reduce harmful emissions over time, and it will generate investments for clean energy and climate justice. Just as a quick refresher, the state's Climate Action Council recommended cap and invest in the scoping plan that was required by the Climate Act on how to achieve our emissions goals, and it determined that an enforceable cap was the best way to achieve the limits, and also this program could do so at the lowest cost. Governor Hochul embraced cap and invest in her State of the State address and the recently enacted budget, which I'll go over in the next slide. I just want to give a quick overview on how this works. It sets a legally enforceable limit, which is the cap on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that can be emitted statewide. Each year, the emissions cap will decline to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted. The illustrative chart on the right side shows how the maximum amount of allowable emissions in the state will decline each year. There's a legal requirement for large sources of emissions to purchase or obtain emissions allowances for each ton of emissions associated with their activities. And to comply with the program, those sources will have to surrender the allowances to cover their emissions for a given year. And then those allowances would be retired permanently, so they can never be used again to cover a ton of emissions. Because the overall amount of emissions allowances issued by the state is capped and declines in number each year, we have the legal certainty to know that emissions will in fact decrease to meet our statewide requirements. And then most emissions allowances will be sold by the state through auctions, and this will generate proceeds that can be invested. So, emissions will decline, and as they decline, clean energy will grow. And as we grow clean energy, we must do so with the lens of justice, as is required by the law. So in the next slide, let me just quickly cover the budget. So the fiscal year budget, 2023-24 budget, this created the framework to support the program by establishing a climate action fund for future auction proceeds from the emissions allowances, and it specified 3 buckets within it. First, to offset any increased energy cost burden for consumers, there's a consumer climate action account that will deliver at least 30% of future proceeds to every New Yorker. Similarly, there's a small business climate action account that was created that will direct up to 3% of future proceeds to mitigate costs to industrial small businesses. Both of those slices of the pie will help deliver on a key principle Governor Hochul articulated, which is making the program affordable. The remaining 2/3 of the funds would be directed to a climate investment account to support the transition to a green economy, and that can fund initiatives that have been identified in the scoping plan, which covers strategies to reduce emissions from every sector and support adaptation and resilience measures and community engagement. At least 35%, with the goal of 40% of the investments from this account would need to directly benefit disadvantaged communities. Really important point I want to note is that the budget called for a climate affordability study due by the 1st of next year that would deliver recommendations for the use of the 30% of the funds in the Consumer Climate Action Account, and it will look at the best mechanisms for getting funds directly to New Yorkers, and importantly, how the benefits can be structured and distributed in an equitable manner. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of considerations that go into that. So that is a priority for the study to look into. So right now we're in the pre-proposal stakeholder outreach phase and seeking input on many of the yet to be determined features of this program. There will be a formal draft and rulemaking process, which we anticipate next year with public hearings and public comments. And then the Cap and Invest program would launch, which we currently anticipate being in 2025. And then after that, you can anticipate the funding streams will become available. So I'll make sure to drop a link to the chat in that for more info. So now I just want to quickly go over a couple of programs that I think are relevant. One is I'm really excited, about awareness and the efforts that we're doing to support clean energy educator institutes and workshops that are led by Y-Maker. They train teachers in grades 4 through 12 to bring clean energy education into the classroom. And the goal is to have at least half of the teachers in this program be educators in disadvantaged communities. They are provided stipends for attending the 4-day institute and the workshop. Teachers from disadvantaged communities get a higher amount of a stipend. And teaching, exposing kids to clean energy is a very critical step in all of this. And so this is an important way that we can advance that. I'm going to skip something on the Clean Green Schools, but I can come back to that when I cover the Bond Act. Just really quickly, I want to just talk about some things that we're funding. This is a climate justice fellowship, 12-month full-time fellowships for individuals from priority populations, and they'll get invaluable work experience within organizations and businesses that are advancing climate justice. So applications are being accepted from eligible entities, as well as for fellows who want to, be a fellow. And so this is an important thing to kind of increase participation in the clean energy economy. There's also an on-the-job training program, and this encourages clean energy businesses that you see on the screen to hire and provide on-the-job training for full-time permanent new workers. It reimburses the wages of new hires for between 50 to 75% for the training period. And it's 6 months for hires from priority populations, disadvantaged communities. It's 4 months for other hires. And so this is another way to really help people develop skills and grow their career in the clean energy economy. And the last thing I'll mention is the Clean Energy Internship Program on this. And this is for eligible clean energy businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities to hire interns. And this program reimburses 75 to 90% of the wages for up to $17 an hour. And the internship would need to be for a minimum of 8 weeks. It's available for current and recent graduates of New York State colleges, as well as for individuals from priority populations and disadvantaged communities who don't meet college graduation requirements. And this is just an important sliver of how we're supporting the workforce aspect of our work. And now I want to just talk about another massive pot of funding that will be coming through the Environmental Bond Act. This will invest in climate change mitigation through clean energy and natural resource protection. 1.5 billion will go to that, and then it'll also invest in the stuff on the left, which is not directly climate mitigation, but related to adaptation and resilience. And some of the stuff for land conservation obviously does mitigate climate change. One thing to highlight here, though, is 35 to 40% of the benefits of all the spending must occur in disadvantaged communities. There's also specifically $200 million that for eliminating air and water pollution in disadvantaged communities. If you have initial ideas on projects or concepts that you would like the state to know about, please look at the link down there and submit those ideas by September 30. And we will incorporate these ideas into the program design, which will roll out in phases over the next few years. And the last thing I just want to note is that, I didn't mention anything about solar, electric vehicle charging, buildings. I mean, there's a range of things I could have mentioned. Part of promoting that is the work of the clean energy hubs. These are really vital, that are established in all 10 regional economic development councils of the state and 3 in New York City. So, if you live, own property, or operate a business in the Hudson Valley and you're looking for ways to access clean energy programs that NYSERDA offers, then, I would encourage you to contact your Mid-Hudson hub. And they're really striving to expand access to the benefits of our programs in disadvantaged communities that are currently surveying the barriers to accessing the programs, and that will be used to improve our efforts. So yeah, and with that, I think I'll stop. So thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Samir. So we're going to open it up for questions and answers now, but as you can see, there's tons of information, and we're not expecting everyone to remember all these things, but just so you know, Samir and Morgan are resources that are available. Their job is to make sure these programs are equitable and have a justice lens. And they're available to help answer your questions beyond this. I think Melissa and Sustainable Hudson Valley will be sharing this recording and the slides. We've added a bunch of links on the chat, and we will email them to you. But if anyone has any questions, please, this is the time. And maybe I'll start. I know this state level, federal level stuff can be confusing, and I did include in the chat that the state has their own mapping tool to identify disadvantaged communities. And Morgan, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Justice 40, which is a federal initiative. They use their own tool called EJ Screen, and WE ACT actually is helping spread the word about Justice 40. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the executive order, Morgan, or share a little bit about your Justice 40 Forward initiative.
Yeah, I just briefly. I mean, I think obviously Justice 40 is the executive order at the outset of the Biden administration that is actually mirroring the CLCPA with the idea that 40% of the benefits in climate infrastructure and climate investment would go to disadvantaged communities. Yeah, and so that's what's been carried out with some of the recent legislation, like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is directing, I think, $40 billion across government agencies, and that was the idea of the Justice 40 initiative, was that it would be carried out, implemented in each of the federal agencies as they did work related to environmental justice and climate. But yeah, that I don't know what else to say about that, except that, you know, WEACT has been involved on the implementation front and has been doing a series of city tours across the US that some of our staff on the call have been involved in, really trying to understand different communities of different sizes and, you know, throughout the country in different states, what their needs are to be able to capture the funds that are you know, coming down. And I think a lot of what we found is that just you know, communities aren't very well equipped, and maybe by design, to be able to really take advantage of these federal funds. You know, many communities aren't set up, I think, in terms of eligibility, but also just, you know, a lot of communities don't have grant writers who are actually able to apply. And so that's really one place where the TICTAC fits in, is like filling this resource gap that's in the way of people taking advantage of these funds.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I'm curious, like, so you're talking about all this funding that would be to parts of it would be to clean up polluted areas, especially urban areas, I imagine, that kind of stuff. I'm curious, like, what kind of techniques and projects or proposals are you seeing, or are they getting for this kind of work? Like, what does that look like on the ground, I guess, is what I'm curious.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough question. I don't think anybody has the answer to that yet. I mean, I think it's about because these opportunities are now you know, emerging, and so I think we're going to see, and I think that, you know, the purpose of like what we're doing here really is to make sure that people are able to develop and apply for those projects, because there's so much potential there. But I think it's probably very different, you know, from region to region.
I'm guessing it would include hard infrastructure, maybe water pipe replacement, but also green infrastructure, water resource remediation, and then energy stuff. And somebody, we had a webinar a few days ago with Tim Wiedemann from Congressman Ryan's office, and we had a slide hiccup. So he was presenting without slides, and he had this roundup of federal funding programs that was it was like 10 minutes of unending program titles and descriptions, and he did a great job. But it's just the vastness of what's out there. I think, you know, we're going to be doing our best at Sustainable Hudson Valley to organize stuff, you know, and provide, you know, a portal to the portals even.
And for those that are not tracking acronyms, and once you start reading into these opportunities, you notice there's hundreds of different acronyms, and some of them use the same letters to mean the same thing. CLCPA is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And the survey that Samir mentioned, please, the information you're learning here today, share broadly. I know the recording is going to exist, and we could share that so other people will be able to take advantage of this information. But that Bond Act survey, we want to make sure communities propose projects they're interested in. So please share that link to the survey so the state could hear what you have in mind for your communities. And I think just a quick note, these are all exciting initiatives, but something to keep in mind in terms of equity and justice is that some of these huge projects might actually accelerate displacement and what they call green gentrification. And I think the importance of acknowledging that, and this is why we want to make sure And a call to action to everyone here on this call is to please get involved, educate yourself about these resources that are available, take personal action, not just like recycling and riding your bike to work, but joining, potentially, if you have the time, volunteering at your advisory council or being engaged with your local municipality on how they can take advantage of these funds. A lot of leaders have no idea some of these things exist, and we need activated members of our community to bring these opportunities up as well. There's so much going on right now that they might not know this is available.
Yeah. And a lot of people have not indicated where they're from or what they're working on. It would really help us to just know how to reach out and support you. Or if people have comments about the kind of support that your organization especially needs, like what's, we got lots of resources, but what more help can you most use?
And Ronald, I think that important point that you brought up about potential adverse consequences of building a clean energy economy should be addressed through greater program design with communities, and so that's a really exciting thing that NYSERDA is starting to do with the Energy Equity Collaborative, which currently we act as one of the members. It's community members helping to offer input in the perspective of residents in programs. That's one key aspect of it, and then certainly centering economic development to create local wealth where it currently doesn't. Is another important part of that.
Anybody else have any questions? I know there's a lot of information here. And Samir, just curious, how can people get involved in that Energy Equitative Collaborative or sign up to learn more about?
I put my email in the chat. So if you represent a New York organization, just shoot me an email, to indicate that you're interested. We're going to be launching a broader public network for the collaborative of just organizations. So I would say if you want to be, just email me to express your interest in that, and then then I'll follow up with you.
And I would like to take a moment just to share another resource. And I mentioned that we were part of the Justice 40 Accelerator Program, a really robust program that exists to build capacity locally for organizations. And they do have a really extensive resource hub, and I'll share the link in the chat. But there's more information that anyone would care to have, and it depends on what you're looking to do, but it goes over the different federal funding, state funding, frameworks, best practices. It's just a dump of information here, and I will include this in the chat. And you might find it useful. Please take advantage of those resources. The goal is to grow the environmental justice space, and take advantage of these opportunities that do have a time horizon. Administrations can change. Funding has statutory requirements for a number of years that it will be available. So we need to get activated as soon as possible, and start bringing together our communities to take advantage of these resources. And I just want to end with a Cecil Corbin Mark quote that I was listening to one of his videos, and inspired by him. And he mentioned our democracy needs to be responsive to human needs, not corporate needs. Our democracy needs to be responsive to planet to be able to continue this American experiment into the future. And that just it's such a powerful quote. And when you think about the atrocities some of our ancestors committed and some of the people in our families, communities that have suffered from those injustices, and start thinking about like, what legacy do you want to leave behind and what kind of ancestor do you want to be? This is like the time to act and decide how are we going to take advantage of all these opportunities for our communities, for our families. So I just wanted to thank Morgan, Samir, Melissa, and the rest of the Sustainable Hudson Valley team for helping spread the word about these opportunities. They could change the trajectory of our families, our communities, our nation, and they're all very exciting, but we all need to take action. So thank you all for taking the time and being here. I will be mindful of everyone's time. We do have about 30 seconds left. And everyone has Melissa's email, Morgan and Samir, and I will add mine. If anyone has any future questions, feel free to ask. It really is going to take a village to implement and envision a better future. And we thank you all for taking the time to be here and taking a deep dive on this.
Great
Thank-
job, everybody. Thanks so much. And please don't be a stranger.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll package up resources and share them around. We'll share any surveys we get. We hope we get some evaluations.
Yes, please fill out
Right.
the survey, folks.
Okay. We set you free.
Good afternoon.